Yeah. I'll turn that on before I forget. Hi, Sean.
Hello, everyone.
Oh,
Thanks for calling in from whatever far-flung place you're at today.
Not all that far. I'm just in Cincinnati.
Oh, not too exotic then.
No, not exotic at all.
All right, Tracy, whenever you're ready, to call the meeting to order.
Okay, hi, everybody.
hi.
Glad we made quorum almost barely, but we're here. And so we'll call the meeting to order. Did you want to do a roll call?
That's all right. I have taken down the names of everyone who's present. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks, Michelle. So, well, I can't approve them and be part of the minutes approval for November 29th because I wasn't there. Do we have enough people do we have enough people to vote on that today?
Andy, what is your take on that?
Yeah, you can vote to approve them today. And ironically, Tracy, you can vote even though you weren't at the meeting. Something I learned from Robert's rules recently, that it doesn't matter if you're at the meeting as long as you're not. Really, the only way to not approve them is for someone to object and say that something's wrong. And so as long as that's not happening, they're going to pass with or without your vote. So.
Okay, how do we feel about the minutes, everybody? They were circulated quite a while ago.
I think we're all right.
I feel that they were not entirely reflective of my recollection of the meeting. I'm sorry, I'm silencing my phones. There was like mention of things that we need to discuss yet about turn taking with speaking and such that I felt was rather inappropriate to have in the meeting notes from what I'm recalling at the moment.
Okay, so is there a change you're recommending specifically?
I would like to have that struck from the notes.
Okay, is there anything else anybody had noted about the minutes?
Not me.
I'm okay. I don't know what you were objecting to, but if everyone else thinks that's okay.
I think that we need to be talking more about process and how things function in here and just things that have happened since. I think that those meeting notes, I need access to the video recording in order to give more thorough, detailed comment on it than that.
Okay, did we want to table this and then you could make
Yeah.
make some notes about it and you could
I think-
either send that over to Michelle or we could revisit it next month?
Yeah, I think that's probably the best tack to take right now.
Okay, well then that's what we'll do. We'll table the minutes approval for next month. If you wanted to make some specific notes of what you thought need to be changed so that we can be more specific on that next month at the beginning of the meeting, that'd be great. I mean.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we wanted to hear from Michelle about the latest from Steve Meltzer of DLZ and his progress on the evaluation process.
Yes, so the progress report came before the last meeting. And I asked Steve for an update. So everyone had that to review, where he had noted all the work that was accomplished, continuing the data collection efforts, coordinated data needs with the client, provided an update on progress for the meetings, reactivated the ADA public survey. So that was after the changes were made. That was reactivated and then bumped. Responded to requests for guidance on ADA issues, continued field review of field data for facilities, initiated data collection for curb ramps and pedestrian push buttons. So that data collection is continuing. And then he anticipated that he would continue to review the floor plans and mapping of the city facilities, continue coordination and data collection efforts, continue project management activities and review collected data, continue the data collection for the curb ramps and pedestrian push buttons, complete review of missing information at Lakewood Park. He still needs to go to the bandstand, the inside. Complete review of pedestrian access routes and continue the prep of the transition plan. So he's continuing all of that work, and he has assisted by providing some facility reports and park reports as we started to work on with consultants on a Madison Park master plan. So he is able to provide all the ADA data for the curb ramps, the sidewalks, and all the facilities at Madison Park that we give to the county consultant. And then he also helped providing some data for a project that Public Works was working on. So it's been nice that even though we don't have the completed transition plan, we do have those evaluations, and he's able to provide those to consultants now so they can use it to as they're working on different plans. I did put that Excel document for questions about his progress reports, and I only received one question. It was related to where the survey was posted. So I did put in there the link to the survey, and I did email where the survey is located.
I just put my comment in chat. I was wondering about the survey. My memory is not good when I'm having this fatigue issues that I'm having, so I didn't want to interrupt you, and I didn't want to
Sure.
get to make that comment. I had noted the issues on the survey when it went live before last year, that it had some typos in it and some question types that weren't appropriate. Did that get fixed?
So I think you worked with Steve on that, and I believe he did fix those. I can ask him if you haven't heard back from him on it, but I thought that was all taken care of.
I never got follow-up on that from him.
Okay, I will follow up.
Or if I did, it got lost in my inbox. It's possible too.
Okay. I will send him an email now while we continue on with the meeting.
Is there an expected, like, does he have a target date on when when we'll actually start to see a tangible document of transition plan and also of recommendations on upgrades or corrections that need to be done?
So that is another question I can put to Steve.
Okay, sorry, I didn't put that in the spreadsheet.
That's okay. So we want to know when we will start to receive tangible, like, parts of this rough draft of the transition plan.
Right.
Okay.
Did anybody else have anything, any other questions or input about the report or the progress report so far?
So that's from, but when was that last updated? Was it, no,
It was just before the February
February? Okay.
meeting.
Was
And
it
then-
February or January? Okay.
Yeah. And so he's continuing. We do see the DLZ guys out there at the intersections. I have reports from people seeing them with their trucks around. And we are starting to set up as well some of the trainings for city workers that are going to happen in the summer. Looks like June is when we're going to start that. So I'm working with Steve on that as well.
Okay. So not much new then since then, I guess, where it's only been a month. Like significant at least.
He's still, I mean, he's got the data and he's working through that whole tabulation and the recommendations. So I'll just have to ask him when he thinks we will have that rough draft to start looking at, or if he's gonna give it to us in parts, or if it's just gonna be the whole thing, kind of how he's gonna handle that.
Oh, for my other activities beyond Lakewood, I have developed a survey to, basically it's an intake form to assess needs for accommodations that people may have. I'm mostly doing it for my faith community, but you're welcome to have access to that product to use for Lakewood too, if you want. It's just a Google form at this point. But I've been crowdsourcing input on that from some disabled friends to make sure that I'm not missing anything.
Sure, I'll take a look at it if you want to send it along. That'd be great. Thank you.
I'll make a copy of it and make you editor so that you can access it. Yeah, you use Google Forms, I think, right? I think I've seen you use Google Forms.
It's usually Excel. I have Excel accessible on Microsoft OneDrive.
I couldn't remember if the city was using Google or Microsoft for the background.
Yeah, they look really similar, so.
I'll see if I can get it to convert to make it easier for you that way.
Okay, thank you.
That's everything that we've got on item 4 on the agenda. Are we ready to move on to item 5?
I don't have anything further on that.
Michelle and Sean and Tracy all seem to be
Tracy,
fine.
you're talking, but you're muted.
Sorry about
Nothing else
that.
for me.
I was talking, but I was muted.
Oops.
Okay, so does anybody else have any other questions about the progress report? Or can we move on to the next thing?
Yeah, I guess just what did Michelle, do you know when? I mean, do you think it'll be a significant update next month? I mean, I guess it's any kind of timeline. Do you have any idea from Steve?
I know that the goal is to have the document out, the full rough draft out sometime this summer for public comment and review, because we do want to be able to make a recommendation to city council by fall, because we're hoping if we have the recommendation, we can get something in the budget to start chipping away at things next year. So that's been our goal, is to get it ready in time for the budget season. So in order to do that, he will have to have that rough draft. You know, we'll make it publicly available in the libraries and online, but I don't have an exact date yet.
Okay, but the plan is to have approval for the 2024 budget.
Yes, we'd like to have that transition plan adopted in the fall and then be able to start budgeting. We know it's going to be a considerable amount of money, so we know we won't be able to do everything in 1 year, but that's part of what the transition plan helps, is to prioritize the changes. And then we can start budgeting each year for them.
Okay, so we just want to make sure that the task force sees that draft before it gets published to the public. That's just an assumption that I'm making, that we will be able to see that before it gets published to the public.
That's my assumption, but I don't know if that's how he's going to do it. So I'm going to ask him that as well.
Okay, yeah, because I would like to motion that we definitely see that and that we have input on it before that draft goes out to public eyes.
I second
we
the
can-
motion.
So that we can give our input on that.
So yeah,
Does everybody else agree with that?
I do. And who ultimately makes that decision? And who would, and assuming at least we get to see it, then obviously have some input ideally. Like, is that up to Steve? Is that up to the city?
I feel like that brings us to that question brings us to our next agenda item. So
Okay, good segue.
Yeah, it's a really good segue because we were about to talk about on our next agenda item, like what is like our responsibility as a task force? What are we here for and what is expected of us?
Tracy, point of order, you did make a motion. I seconded. I think we need to take a vote. Sean said that he's in agreement. Michelle?
I'm in.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
agreement.
that's not something I don't think we need to vote on that at the moment, but yeah, we might consider making that something that we should vote on, but what I want to talk about was that what our mission as a task force is and what the resolution states is that we are actually we are the ones drafting this transition plan. Now, obviously, Steve is the expert on, you know, the city programs, the streets, the sidewalks, all the things that he's doing. And those are all of the compliance issues that need to go into the transition plan. And that's for us to kind of like make sure that, you know, we're giving our input on that and I guess overseeing or, you know, contributing to in some way, shape or form as this is developed, as a transition plan gets developed and drafted. And I had a conversation with Sarah about this because there seems to be like a lot of things that we're bringing up that might not be related to directly to ADA compliance. Like we have ideas about things that we want to see happen, and that's not necessarily something that fits into the transition plan. Or there might be things that we do have input on that would fit into the ADA compliance. So what Sarah and I kind of came up with, and what we're going to suggest that we do is that we come up as a task force of the list of things that we are talking about outside of the scope of what Steve is working on, and come up with that list and kind of create like just a list and then decide what on that list would fit, what on that list needs to be in the transition plan that might not already be there. And then the additional items would be sort of an addendum to the transition plan. And one of the things that I guess City Council and Sarah specifically has been talking a lot about is to create an ongoing accessibility commission or accessibility, you know, group of people that would be ongoing. It would be a standing committee, and that whatever was on that addendum that might not be part of the compliance related items would be picked up by that committee that would go on. So maybe one of the items on this document would include the creation of an accessibility committee that would be a standing committee. So these would just be like kind of a list of recommendations that we're all going to come up with on our, you know, as a group on our own, and then vote to implement them into the document. And then at the end, we could all determine with Steve and with the city, what is the things that belongs on the transition plan and what are the things that are going to get carried on as an addendum to the transition plan that would be just recommendations that aren't necessarily legal requirements of the city. So that's kind of like what I want to mention about with the mission of the task force today, and just say that that's, you know, we're here to kind of be able to give our inputs from whatever perspective of expertise we were considered to be appointed for, and to kind of pick up the slack of what might not be thought of from a perspective of an administrator, or of somebody who might not have a disability, or somebody who doesn't work in the field of patient care or something like that. So if anybody has anything to add to that, go ahead and just speak up at your own leisure, and then we can move on to the next item if nobody had any input on that.
I think the creation of a standing committee for council to bring up issues that are not necessarily addressed by the transition plan or aren't governed by the transition plan is a very exciting thing. You know, we all have a lot of ideas, and not we all, but many of us who are disabled on this board or this task force have ideas of what the city could do to make life a little bit more welcoming to people with disabilities. And again, they're not things that the task force or the transition plan can take care of. So I think that the idea of a standing committee would be a great one. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I envision that as being something potentially that could be consulted, that standing committee could be consulted if there's a question about the reasonableness of an accommodation request. Having it, taking a nothing about us without us stance of having actual disabled people that get consulted on those kinds of issues instead of just the people that are able to have the full-time employment with the city or whatever structure that is saying, oh, well, we don't think that's reasonable. Having a check on that power, I think, would be a good thing for a municipally appointed committee to do. Sean, do you have anything to say?
Right.
You're muted.
I'm not sure I really have anything to add right now to that. Other than, we kind of, I know the last point on the agenda, number 8. So I think there's probably gonna be some overlap here, but I think it is going to be important for us as a group, and then I guess as a group, to identify what our goals are. Have they changed since we started this? Because are we 3? Are we 2 years in? We're not 3 years in, are we?
The resolution was adopted. No, the date isn't on this. I want to say it's like 1.5 years, almost 2 years.
Pandemic time has all of our.
I know it's completely altered my sense of time. But regardless, do we have the ability to change, what our mission and scope and goals are? And is that something we want to do, or are we content with the direction things are headed? And what ultimately is the task force role, and what power or control do we have over, the implementation and then the definition of the plan? So like I said, there's going to be some overlap, because I think we're all kind of saying the same thing, and maybe in different ways, but that's all. I think maybe in a reevaluation, or maybe even so September 2020. I mean, we're yeah. So anyway, that's just kind of where I'm at with things. I think the past, not having met for a few months, give us some all opportunity to kind of reflect on where things are headed, and what changes. It's 2.5 years in. What changes do we need to make as a group, if any? But I think it's important. It's important to think about it.
That's in our charter. We are under a charter from City Council that the formation of this task force is codified. And from what Michelle's saying about the council's desire to have the report to be able to vote on it for the budget, my understanding is once that is done, from what the charter that formed this task force says, once the transition plan is completed and submitted to City Council, this task force ceases to exist.
And I kind of understood that too. Yeah.
Yep.
Once council says it's okay, then we don't have to give them any more input.
Yeah, so another thing that, and unfortunately Sarah couldn't be here today, but we could talk more with Sarah next month, hopefully, about it, was that what she was envisioning, that our part of what we will do with what Steve presents to us is that we will kind of review the prioritization of what they decide the order of what needs to be fixed is. And then we will, maybe make input on that particular aspect of the transition plan to say, well, we feel that even though these things are all equally need to be done, we feel that this would benefit the community if they did it in this order, or if they, swapped out this for this. I don't know what the items are, so I can't really give specific examples, but that's kind of what Sarah was referring to, was that was something that she thought that we would really need to be directly involved with to benefit, the community in the best possible way.
So then
'Cause
going back
there
to what
is-
you were saying, then it's more important that we see it before the rest of the general public sees it, to help craft that before they see what council is going to be discussing, correct?
Well, I just feel because my personal view is that because the resolution states that we're drafting the plan and that we are the ones presenting it to council once it's completed, that we are going to be reviewing it before it's actually presented to the public or to council. So hopefully that's going to be the case, and we should definitely solidify that that is going to be the case before we moving forward. So when we get Sarah back at our next meeting, we can make sure that that's the case, and that you know, we'll make sure that if we need to vote on that, then we will, but I don't think we should have to vote on that since the resolution states that. So, okay, so if nobody had anything else regarding
Well,
Well,
the mission, go ahead.
oh, Sean, go ahead.
No, I mean, if that isn't the case, which I mean, we're all assuming it is, and the task force is going to be dissolved once that transition plan is, I guess, accepted or rejected or whatever, then if we don't have a role in the plan itself, minor, major, you know, either determining priorities or the wording or timelines and what is the point of the task force.
Oh, well, the priorities will be listed, the priorities as part of the transition plan. So that's part
Well,
of.
correct, but if we don't have a voice in that, then what are we doing?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So we want to see that, Michelle, before it gets posted.
I would assume that's what's gonna happen. I just didn't want to say what Steve needs to say because Steve's the consultant, so.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't want a repeat of the situation with the survey going live without us getting a chance to see it first. That is, maybe that's where Tracy's coming from as well, but that.
well, no, I didn't actually, I don't feel that we weren't here to, you know, put the survey together. It was nice that we were able to make changes to it, though. I appreciate that, but the transition plan is literally our mission. So we definitely need to have input on it. Otherwise, you know, like Sean said, why are we here? Okay, so
No.
then we're just establishing that we want to see that, and that's on record that we want to see that before it's put out to the public, and we will talk about that again next month to make sure that that's confirmed, that we are going to see it before it's published or before it's presented or voted on. We vote on it first before anybody.
Michelle, is there a way that you can get that to Steve, that, you know, the task force has specifically asked him to get us a rough draft, if you will, of the transition plan, so we can go over it ourselves, ask him any questions, input our thoughts and suggestions before it goes to council?
Yes, I actually just texted Steve. I would have had him come to the meeting, but we, you know, on the agenda, we didn't have a lot of time for Steve, so, but I did tell him that you guys wanted to see it before it went out to the public, and he said, yes, absolutely, you'll see it. Nothing will go out to the public until it goes through our process, which includes the task force, so.
Perfect.
And then I'm asking him if he has an idea of when that will be. And he said, when it is done, he's still working on the right of way ahead of schedule. So he is hoping sometime in May, we'll get a look at it. So,
Great.
Yep.
Thanks. Okay, so we're probably going to get done early today because we don't really have enough members to fill up the whole end if we do 5 minutes for everybody. But I just wanted to do a quick discussion of we've already kind of discussed our process. We want to be able to vote on the transition plan, obviously, before it gets moved ahead to the next team of people that need to see it. And we want to have a list of things that everybody on the task force wants to see happen, whether that would be part of the compliance or not. So that's our process right now. If you have, one of the things that we wanted to make a list about was, and that's the next item. So let me just real quick say is that if anybody has anything they want to add to our agendas every month, please reach out. If you think that there's an item we need to discuss specifically, or that you have that you want to discuss, please reach out. We're going to be working more closely with Michelle to make sure that the agenda reflects what the task force wants to discuss, so that everybody has a voice. So if you need time, if you need something you want to talk about, please just reach out to myself just send a group email, to everybody and just say, can we put this on the agenda for next month? And please be sure to give plenty of notice, because we are trying to get those agendas and minutes out at least a week in advance of the meetings. So please make sure that you give plenty of time for that. And the next thing that I want to talk about was one of the examples of an item that might go on that list that we'll call it the addendum. Okay, we'll call it the addendum to the ADA transition plan. And some of the items, like I said, will get moved onto the transition plan, and some of the items will just remain as recommendations. But one of the things that we keep discussing is movable barriers. And movable barriers are kind of an elusive thing, because it isn't like a brick and mortar thing, and it's not a permanent structure, and it's not a process, or it's more of a process that, like, how do we get it out to the public that how they're supposed to handle if they encounter a movable barrier? How are they supposed to report that? How do they handle it? What is the alternate route that they can take safely, or should they attempt an alternate route on their own? So we would like to talk about adding an item like this and getting a little bit into detail on what suggestions we can make, and a list of examples of movable barriers. And I did have a brief discussion individually with Ami and Michelle, because we experience disabilities. So we have experienced a plethora of these movable barriers, and we were planning to, the three of us, get together and brainstorm a list and bring that back to the task force next month of the movable barriers that we all have encountered, and recommendations on what can be done, whether that's in the transition plan specifically, or if the city could provide like a web page that when they upgrade the website to the accessible website, can we have, some information about how residents with disabilities should be handling these examples. And some of the examples are like a car parked, across the sidewalk, or perhaps a construction zone, or planters or some of the dining areas on the, I've experienced where window cleaners had their scaffolding set up, and I had to go into the street, and it's like, these things need to be addressed, but it's a temporary thing. So how do we expedite it quickly so that it can be addressed before the point of maybe it's only there for a couple of days, but it's a busy traffic area. So maybe we want to, have that expedited. So that's just one thing that keeps coming up. And that would be one of the examples that would go on that list. And I'm sure Ami might have some input about this as well.
I actually have a suggestion that Michelle Nocta and Andrew might be able to take to their colleagues, and implement immediately. My middle child is very active in H2O, help to others. I just signed him up for the summer camp that they're going to be having for his second time. And this is mostly middle school kids, but it's also some of the high school kids. Maybe reaching out to, and it's a city school partnership thing. It's run by a city employee who works out of Cove. Emmy Hutchinson, I'm trying to remember her name. I'm blanking on the name. Perhaps we might be able to partner with those kids and have them empowered to be calling the non-emergency line as these kids are walking around Lakewood, or if it's a scooter blocking a sidewalk, have them feel empowered to fix that problem immediately instead of waiting for a disabled person to encounter it and have to report the issue. These kids are already walking around.
That would be a great example of one of the things we would want to brainstorm and maybe put on a list. Like, the parks have ambassadors. Mm-hmm. We created that a few years ago after the shootings at the Madison Park. And the mayor came to the Lakewood Community Relations Advisory Commission and asked us for recommendations. Well, downtown Cleveland has ambassadors that go around downtown. So we thought of that for Lakewood, and they hired, actually, I think at first they used Downtown Cleveland Partnership ambassadors specifically, but perhaps we could make that as one of the suggestions about how to solve movable barriers or help with the problem, having also, with the education of the police force, they're driving around the city all day long. If they see something that's a barrier for a person with disability and they're not busy, then maybe they could address that. Maybe that could be one of the things that they're patrolling for. So these are just some of the things we could put on a list to say, this is the list of measures that the city could take to address this issue that isn't necessarily going to be part of a transition plan. But we want to recommend it because it is a compliance issue, even if it's temporary. And certain things need to be enforced, and how is it going to be enforced? If it's temporary. So,
I mean,
anybody else?
We just had that windstorm, which I'm sure blew some trash cans and other temporary obstructions into pathways. Just encouraging our fellow citizens that are walking around to feel empowered to fix these things instead of waiting for somebody official to do it, I think. And that, starting with the kids, with the H2O kids, I think would give it a bottom up type of making progress and getting this kind of change happening. So, but
Yeah, so we could schedule a time to get together with myself, Michelle, and Ami, and come up with that list of recommendations. That's just one thing that we can do. We can ask for a lot of things. Like we can have community bulletins and say, please don't block the sidewalk when you park in your driveway. Disabled citizens need that clearance. Or we could have, there's all kinds of public service announcement kind of things that can happen. And, but mainly we want to educate people with disabilities to know what to do when that happens. We don't want people going into the street and putting themselves in danger to try to detour around a barrier that might even be something that a city construction zone is resulting in. So myself, I couldn't plenty of times when I was trying to get around on my scooter, so we could talk about all the examples. But yeah, if we could, Michelle, Ami, and I could get together and come up with that list. And if anybody else had a list of things they could think of too, we could all put that together. And then that's just one example. The movable barriers was just one example of an item we would want to put on that addendum. So I think to come up with just a very generalized outline, not so much specific, spelling out every solution, but just saying, here's the list of possible barriers. Here's a list of possible solutions. I think that would be just being very generalized about it, and then let the city people that are the experts in making these plans get together and actually flesh it out.
So do you put, you mentioned the outdoor dining spaces that are, in front on sidewalks, you put that in the same category? You would consider that a movable barrier the same way as the electric scooters that are left everywhere? I'm just curious. It doesn't, just as a conversation point. I'm just, are there regulations defining how much space needs to be allowed? Because I remember, I think Ami, it was the Mars bar at Halloween, right?
Yep.
Where there wasn't, there isn't that much space there. And I think that there's a couple other ones. There's that El Tango, there's some narrow spaces there. So there must be some sort of regulation.
There are regulations, yes.
And there must be, there must be clear, right? And these places must fit, because Barrio's pretty tight too. I'm just thinking of places like Madison. And they must fit within they must be legal. I'm sure these things are.
Well, do we have somebody who goes and inspects that stuff?
Yeah, I feel like this is all part of what Steve is doing, right? So, and then they're educating the city employees, when they're setting this stuff up, don't they have to inspect that?
Yep, it all gets inspected. It all has to meet the ADA guidelines when it's approved. And then, when it's on public sidewalk, it can't be attached to the sidewalk. So things do move. So the building inspectors and the property maintenance people do go by and check, or if somebody complains, they'll go and talk to the owner. If they don't adhere to their plans, if there are consistent complaints, they can be called back to the planning commission, because outdoor dining is a conditional use. So the planning commission can say, hey, if we get any more complaints about you not being in the right spot, we can take away your conditional use. So it's a conditional use They have to have a contract with the city. And Steve did review, there was an update to the outdoor dining and he did review that before it was passed, so. But it's a good point, and that's the reason when the building inspectors get their training from Steve this summer, it'll be when the outdoor dining is set up, because that's one of the things we've said that we would like people to have more training on. You know, when they're looking at the public right of way, so.
Yeah, I feel like things are just like some of the stuff we're talking about is just gonna come together with the transition plan automatically. But some of the stuff like we could just like expand upon, you know, like as far as like getting the word out to the disabled community and getting the word out to the general community about these movable barriers. And just like being awareness really is a big thing with this. So,
Yeah, and I also think that enforcement, like, for example, you were saying the cars across the sidewalk that are parked in a driveway. That technically is illegal, I believe. They're not allowed to cross the sidewalk. So unless
Yep.
we get cops who are willing to stop and say, I'm sorry, you have to move your car, it's not gonna matter. I mean, I guess it's more of an enforcement, like Andrew was saying, or Sean, I'm sorry, was saying, the no, people's chairs move and stuff. It started out being fine by the inspectors, but it's just it keeps moving because people are sitting down and chairs are moving. And so again, how do we keep that enforced? You're not gonna have the property owner like out there back and forth saying, nope, scoot your chair in. I don't know. It's difficult how to tell them, again, do your part, stand up and say no, but nobody's gonna do that.
right. Well, we know Steve has brought up many times about how a place is designed to be totally accessible and then they'll put like a big giant barrier right in the middle of it.
Yes.
And that happened. I think I brought this up. Did I bring this up last month about the you know, all the hospitals, they have the lowered counter area at the reception and
Yes.
they put its kiosk out there and it's not even used for receptionists. But yeah,
Yeah.
so it's just a matter of like awareness and like making this list of suggestions because those are like you said, enforcement issues. All right, so we're coming up on time here. If we all wanted to have 5 minutes, I'm gonna waive my 5 minutes because I had more than 5 minutes to talk. So why don't we go ahead and we could start with Sean. If you have anything you want to talk about or anything that you want to say about what we've been doing or transition plan or.
Yeah, I think I voiced some of my things. I mean, I think just going back to what we were talking about, what our role is going to be in the transition plan. And I think based on Steve's text back that, you know, we're going to have a role and hopefully it's as big as we want it to be. And I think if it's May, they think he's going to have something to at least show us, and they're not looking to submit until fall. That gives us several months to at least voice our opinion on what we think. And again, if we don't have a voice there, then what have we been doing? I think it'd be also interesting for us to discuss, you know, if you know, we're only talking about another 9 months, maybe. We don't know when this task force is going to be dissolved. Hopefully it doesn't end, at least, you know, maybe not as a task force commissioned by the city, but something we can do outside of that to make sure that, you know, this time hasn't been a waste and that we can continue to make changes. And, you know, again, it's a good group of people and I think we all care. So I hope we can continue to do some positive things. As a task force itself, I would love, I know for me, I'm on these calls, Zoom calls, Teams calls all day long for work. Not all day long, but more than I like. So sometimes I'm exhausted by the time I get on these and I'm sick of seeing my own face on the screen all the time. It'd be great at some point we could, in the summer, maybe just meet in person or even get together in person, something. I know it's hard with schedules and with everybody getting around, but I think it'd be nice to something to do. At least for me, I think it's, you know, we've all met maybe 2 or 3 times, I think, together. Again, I know it's not easy for everyone, but it'd be nice if we could try to do that at some point. But
Would you like that as an official thing or is just purely social?
either one, really. I mean, I think officially it'd be nice before this is all over to get together. But I think there's for me, it's easier to connect with people in person. And I actually, I do better in person. Like I said, I'm exhausted with Teams and Zoom calls all day
Well,
long.
I think, speaking for me anyway, and maybe Tracy and Amy too, it's easier to get around for us to get in and out of somewhere to meet, like to all meet in Lakewood Park or something for
That's
a
fine.
meeting. You know,
Cool.
I think it's just as easy for us to get out there as anywhere because the weather's nice. It's easier to move around. It's not slippery, slidey. What do you say, Tracy? Anything, Tracy?
Tracy's muted.
Yeah,
know.
I'm down for it. I'm allowed to walk again, even though I can't walk yet, but my doctor said, give it a whirl. We'll see.
Oh.
I'm getting out more. I'm allowed to drive again. I haven't driven anywhere, but by summer, maybe I'll be walking and hopefully with less pain. So,
Yeah, so even if in June or July, that would be something we could aim for.
Yeah, I just throwing it out there. Let's start thinking about it.
I think it's a good idea. I think it's not a bad one. Go with it.
That's all I got.
All right, Michelle, you're on.
I'm on. I think I've said everything I have to say. You don't want to hear my big mouth anymore. I look forward to, once the council is over, once this task force is over, perhaps working with council to go over some of the things that aren't necessarily task force worthy, or would be even something that the task force would cover. So I just think the more input you have by people with disabilities or people who are friends of ours, it's better the city can be. That's all. Whoever was next.
I was just gonna say something about the movable barriers issue, the dining, recognizing that the interests of so many, I'm in a conflict resolution class on Monday night, so I'm like doing the needs, interests, values, like the evaluation in my head of all parties involved with that. I mean, the property owners, especially the restaurants, since they're not allowed to have smoking indoors in the bars, you know, having that outdoor space as their smoking section, which then conflicts with our disability needs. And, you know, also some of us who are disabled also have breathing problems and can't be getting close to this, but to the cigarette smoke. And then the city's interest in maintaining, you know, keeping those businesses so that we don't have empty storefronts, and we have the tax revenue from those businesses operating. It's very complicated, and finding something that's win-win for all involved is a really, really difficult task that I'm constantly sitting here trying to balance within myself, as I'm frustrated that I can't get past the sidewalk, or that I'm having an asthma attack because of the smokers right up, you know, in the right of way. So it's complicated, and I just wanted to put out there that I respect and value the work that our city people are doing and how they're getting pulled in so many different directions with these issues.
All
Yeah, I
right.
think that's all of us, right?
And yeah, and Andy's getting pulled in different directions with the kids.
All right. Well, if nobody had anything else, then I would like to make a couple announcements. All right.
Me?
The first thing I wanted to just do a little, I wanted to let everybody know that I heard that Cleveland just appointed their ADA coordinator. So they are getting ready to do their thing that we did. And so I'm super excited about that, because actually when I first started realizing about the lack of ADA coordinators for the local cities, I called a number of cities, and Cleveland was one of them. And I thought Cleveland was going to be the one that took the longest, but they actually like did it pretty quickly. And I also want to just say is that what they're doing is the speed that they're doing things is directly related to our existence, because one of our council members of council actually works for the city of Cleveland also as an assistant law director, and he was put on the task of making all this happen in Cleveland. So he already had seen what we did in Lakewood, so they already had quite a bit of information and experience, and they're also going to be consulting with Mayor George as well to ask and kind of just pick Mayor George's brain about what we did in Lakewood and how they can incorporate that into the template of what Cleveland's going to do. So I was really excited about that this week, and I just thought everybody would be interested in hearing about that. And I'm also making calls to Rocky River as well. And I'm just scratching the surface right now with Rocky River, but they are in discussion of that they know now that they were supposed to have an ADA coordinator for the public and not just for their employees. So they are in discussion of who that's going to be now. So things are happening in Northeast Ohio, and if any of you get inspired to call your city, any other cities in the area, to kind of just, let them know what we've succeeded with in Lakewood, and hopefully that they can become aware as well, that they too can become compliant with the federal regulations. So yeah, so also we wanted to, I did want to take a moment to mention Judy Human and that she passed away a few weeks ago, and that she's, for those of you that don't know, she's considered like the mother of disability rights and had a big part of the passing of the ADA. And if you haven't seen Crip Camp on Netflix, please watch it, because that will tell you a lot about her and about her work and why she's important. So that's all I had to say.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I watched Crip Camp. It was a good movie. Good documentary, yeah.
My husband actually worked at that camp the summer that we started dating.
Oh, wow.
Camp Jeanette. He still has the hoodie.
So does somebody have to motion to adjourn?
Yeah, if nobody has anything else, then I guess, does anybody wanna, we made our agenda, right, Michelle?
We got done with it 7 minutes early.
For once?
Okay, cool. Well, our next meeting is scheduled for April 25th.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
no, it looks like you got everything. Great job, everyone.
if anybody
Woo!
has anything that you want to see on the agenda for next month, please let us know very quickly. And we're probably gonna have Steve, from what Michelle said earlier, come give us an update, and we'll solidify that we want to vote. Obviously, we're gonna vote on our transition plan before it moves to the next level. So we'll find out more information from him when we get to see that.
I don't think Steve will be able to make the next 2 meetings, although I do expect more updates from him. And if we have specific, like these questions that I took down, I'll get more complete answers, like about the survey that Ami had asked about and things like that. But he did tell me he's refereeing in the sports season, so there's going to be some conflict, but I think we can just keep the communication open with him. He's very open to giving us those reports and doing, answering any questions whenever we need him. So.
Okay, great. If anybody has any other items for the addendum besides we have movable barriers on there right now, and we have the creation of a accessibility committee, standing committee, and we want to add to that list anything anybody else can think of that, again, wouldn't be part of the transition plan, then please bring that to our next meeting, because we're going to start putting that down on paper and fleshing that out. And if anybody wanted a motion to adjourn, then I have nothing else to say.
I motion we adjourn.
Second,
Second.
All right.
all
Meeting
approved?
adjourned. Oh, all in favor. Everybody's like, yeah, motion.
Yay. Any opposed? Good to go.
Angie, you're pretty quiet over there. You're not saying a word.
He doesn't get a vote.